The rain fell hard on the old community center that Tuesday evening. Marcus Chun sat in his black car outside the building, watching water run down his windows. He was early, as always. The charity concert would not start for another 2 hours, but Marcus liked to arrive early. He needed time to feel the piano, to test the sound, to make sure everything was perfect. Marcus was not just any piano player. He was famous around the world. People paid hundreds of dollars to hear him play. His concerts sold out in minutes. Music magazines wrote stories about him. Young piano students dreamed of playing like him someday. But tonight he was playing for free. This concert was special. All the money would go to help poor children in the city. He took his umbrella and walked quickly to the back door of the community center. The building was old and plain. The paint was peeling off the walls. The carpet was worn out in many places. This was very different from the fancy concert halls where Marcus usually played. Those places had marble floors and gold decorations. They had comfortable seats and perfect lighting. This place was simple and humble. Marcus pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The smell of old wood and cleaning supplies filled his nose. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. He could hear someone moving around in the main hall, where the concert would be. Marcus walked toward the sound. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. A woman was on the stage, cleaning. She was not young, maybe in her late 30s. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a gray uniform with a name tag that said Sarah. In her hands she held a soft cloth and a bottle of furniture polish, but it was not just any cleaning that made Marcus stop and stare. The woman was cleaning the piano, and she was not cleaning it like most people would. Most people would spray the polish and wipe quickly, wanting to finish the job fast. But this woman was different. Sarah moved the cloth slowly and gently across the piano's black surface. She cleaned each key one by one as if each key was precious. She wiped the music stand with great care. When she cleaned the bench, she adjusted it to the perfect height. She stepped back and looked at the piano like an artist looking at a painting. Marcus watched from the doorway, not wanting to disturb her. Then something amazing happened. Sarah began to hum. The melody was soft at first, so quiet that Marcus had to strain to hear it. But as she continued cleaning, her humming grew stronger. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The melody Sarah was humming was not simple. It was not a pop song or a folk tune. It was classical music, and not just any classical music. She was humming Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. This was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. Most people had never heard of it. Even people who liked classical music often did not know this piece. But Sarah was not just humming the melody. She was humming it perfectly. Every note was in the right place. Every phrase was shaped with feeling. As she hummed, she moved her free hand in the air, as if she was conducting an invisible orchestra. Her fingers moved as if they were playing invisible keys. Marcus could not believe what he was seeing and hearing. This woman, this janitor in a simple uniform, knew one of the greatest piano pieces ever written. She knew it well enough to hum it from memory. She knew it well enough to feel its rhythm and emotion. Sarah reached the piano bench and sat down for a moment. She was tired from cleaning and her feet hurt from standing. She looked at the piano keys with longing in her eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and touched one key very gently. The note rang out in the empty hall, clear and beautiful. Sound seemed to surprise Sarah. She pulled her hand back quickly and looked around, as if she was afraid someone might have heard. But the hall was empty, or so she thought. She could not see Marcus standing in the shadows of the doorway. Sarah stood up and continued cleaning. But now she was humming again, and her humming was even more beautiful than before. She moved around the piano like a dancer, her cloth moving in time with the music in her head. She knew exactly where every part of the piano was. She knew which parts needed the most care. Marcus realized that this was not the first time Sarah had cleaned this piano. She had done this many times before. She knew this instrument. She respected it. She loved it. As Sarah worked, Marcus noticed other things. The way she adjusted the piano bench was professional. The way she positioned the music stand was perfect. The way she checked that all the keys were clean and dry showed that she understood how pianos worked. This was not just a cleaning lady doing her job. This was someone who truly cared about music. Sarah finished her work and stepped back to admire the piano. It gleamed under the stage lights. Every surface was spotless. Every key was perfect. She nodded with satisfaction and began to pack up her cleaning supplies. As she worked, she hummed another melody. This time it was Bach, then Mozart, then Beethoven. Each piece was hummed with perfect accuracy and deep feeling. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, amazed by what he was witnessing. Sarah picked up her cleaning bucket and began to walk toward the side door. She would leave the same way she came, quiet and unnoticed. In a few hours, hundreds of people would fill this hall. They would come to hear Marcus Chun, the famous pianist. They would applaud and cheer. They would go home talking about the wonderful music they had heard, but none of them would know about Sarah. None of them would know that before the concert began, this simple woman had prepared their piano with love and care. None of them would know that she had hummed beautiful music while she worked. None of them would know that she understood classical music better than many people who would sit in the audience. Marcus made a decision. He could not let this moment pass. He could not let this woman leave without knowing that someone had heard her beautiful humming. Someone had seen her gentle care for the piano. Someone had recognized her love for music. He stepped out of the shadows and cleared his throat softly. Sarah jumped when she heard the sound behind her. She spun around quickly, her cleaning bucket clattering to the floor. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was not supposed to be here this late. The community center was supposed to be empty except for the setup crew, and they had left an hour ago. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall and thin, with kind eyes and neat black hair. He wore an expensive dark suit and polished shoes. Sarah had never seen him before, but something about him seemed familiar. He did not look angry or upset. Instead, he was smiling gently. "I am sorry," the man said in a soft voice. "I did not mean to scare you. I am Marcus Chun." Sarah's eyes grew wide. Marcus Chun. She knew that name. Everyone who loved classical music knew that name. His picture was on concert posters all over the city. His CDs were in every music store. And he was standing right here in front of her. "Oh no," Sarah said quickly. "I am so sorry, Mr. Chun. I was just finishing the cleaning. I will get out of your way right now. I know you need to practice for the concert tonight." She bent down to pick up her cleaning supplies, her hands shaking with nervousness. She could not believe she had been caught humming while the famous pianist was watching. He probably thought she was silly or strange, but Marcus stepped forward. "Please, do not rush away," he said. "I heard you humming. That was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, was it not?" Sarah stopped moving. She looked up at Marcus with surprise. You heard me?" "Yes," Marcus said, "and it was beautiful." "You know that piece very well." Sarah's face turned red. She stood up slowly, still holding her cleaning cloth. "I am sorry if I disturbed you." "I know I should not have been making noise while working." Marcus shook his head. "You did not disturb me at all. In fact, you amazed me. That is not an easy piece to remember. Most people cannot hum it correctly even after hearing it many times, but you hummed it perfectly." Sarah did not know what to say. She had never talked to a famous person before. She felt very small and unimportant standing next to this great musician. I just love that piece," she said quietly. "I have listened to it many times." "Where did you learn about classical music?" Marcus asked. He was genuinely curious. It was rare to meet someone who knew such difficult pieces so well. Sarah hesitated. She was not used to talking about herself, especially not to someone like Marcus Chun. "I listen to the radio," she said. "And sometimes I watch videos on my phone when I have time." But Marcus could tell there was more to the story. The way Sarah had hummed those pieces showed more than just casual listening. She understood the music deeply. She felt its emotion. She knew its structure. "Have you ever played piano?" Marcus asked gently. Sarah's eyes filled with sadness for just a moment. Then she forced a smile. A little bit, a long time ago, nothing important. Marcus could see that this was a difficult topic for Sarah, but he was too curious to stop asking questions. There was something special about this woman, something that went beyond just liking music. Would you like to try playing something? Marcus asked suddenly. The words came out before he could stop them. The piano is all ready. We have time before the concert. Sarah's eyes grew wide again. Oh no, Mr. Chun, I could not do that. This piano is for real musicians. For people like you? I am just die clean things. I do not play concerts. It is just for fun, Marcus said. No one else is here? No one will hear except me? And I promise I will not judge you. Sarah looked at the beautiful grand piano on the stage. It was the nicest piano she had ever seen up close. Its black surface gleamed under the lights. The keys looked perfect and clean, thanks to her careful work. She had dreamed of playing a piano like this, but she had never thought it would be possible. I have not played in a very long time, Sarah said softly. I would probably sound terrible. I do not think that is true, Marcus said. Someone who can hum Chopin that perfectly has music in their heart. Music in the heart always finds a way to come out through the fingers. Sarah set down her cleaning supplies. She walked slowly toward the stage, looking back at Marcus as if she expected him to change his mind. When she reached the steps leading up to the stage, she paused. Are you sure this is okay? She asked. Marcus nodded encouragingly. I am sure. Sarah climbed the steps carefully. Her work shoes made soft sounds on the wooden stage. She approached the piano bench as if it was something sacred. She had sat on this bench many times while cleaning, but never to play. She sat down and looked at the keys. There were 88 of them, black and white, arranged in the same pattern she had memorized years ago. Her hands hovered over the keys, not quite touching them. What should I play? She asked. Whatever you want, Marcus said. Whatever feels right to you. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she could hear music. There were so many pieces she loved, so many melodies that lived in her heart. She thought about the simple songs she used to play on her old keyboard at home. She thought about the complex pieces she heard on the radio. She thought about the music that made her cry and the music that made her smile. Finally, she opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers found their positions naturally, as if they remembered exactly where they belonged. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft and simple. Sarah started with a basic melody, something she had learned years ago. But as she played, something magical began to happen. Her confidence grew. Her fingers moved more freely. The simple melody became more complex. Marcus watched in amazement as Sarah's playing transformed. She was not just pressing keys randomly. She understood harmony. She understood rhythm. She understood how to make music flow from one note to the next. After a few minutes, Sarah began to play pieces she had only heard, never learned. Her ears had memorized them so well that her fingers could find the notes. She played parts of Mozart sonatas. She played sections of Beethoven symphonies arranged for piano. She played jazz pieces she had heard on late-night radio shows. Marcus pulled out his phone. He knew he had to record this. No one would believe him if he just told them about it. A janitor who could play classical music by ear was extraordinary. He started recording, being careful to stay quiet so Sarah would not notice. Sarah played. Her whole body language changed. The nervous cleaning lady disappeared. In her place sat a musician. Her back straightened, her shoulders relaxed. Her face showed deep concentration and joy. She was not thinking about work or money or problems. She was only thinking about music. The music filled the empty hall with warmth and beauty. Each note was clear and strong. Sarah's timing was perfect. Her touch was gentle but confident. She played with feeling, making each phrase tell a story. Marcus realized he was witnessing something very special. This was not just a woman who liked music. This was a real musician who had been hidden away, like a diamond buried in the ground. Sarah had talent that most people could only dream of having, but who was she really? How had she learned to play? Like this? And why was she working as a janitor instead of performing on stages around the world? Marcus knew he had to find out more about Sarah's story. But for now, he just listened and watched, amazed by the beautiful music flowing from her hands. Sarah's fingers moved across the keys like they had been waiting for this moment their whole life. What started as a simple melody had grown into something much more beautiful. She played for 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. Time seemed to stop in the empty hall. Marcus stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break the magic spell that Sarah was creating. He watched her face as she played. Her eyes were sometimes closed, sometimes looking down at the keys, but never looking at him. She seemed to have forgotten he was there. She was lost in her own world of music. The pieces Sarah played were not simple beginner songs. They were complex classical works that took years to learn properly. But somehow, her hands knew exactly where to go. Her left hand played deep bass notes that provided a strong foundation. Her right hand danced across the higher keys, creating melodies that soared like birds. She played part of a Beethoven sonata, then moved into a Chopin nocturne. The music flowed from one piece to another like a river flowing to the sea. Sarah did not stop between pieces. She connected them with small bridges of her own creation, making it all sound like one long, beautiful song. Marcus had heard these pieces played by the best pianists in the world. He had played many of them himself in famous concert halls. But there was something different about the way Sarah played. Her music had a quality that could not be taught in any school. It came from deep inside her heart. As Sarah played, Marcus noticed things that amazed him even more. Her posture was perfect. Her wrists were positioned exactly right. Her fingers curved in the proper way. These were things that took years of good teaching to learn. But Sarah had learned them somehow. Somewhere. Her timing was also perfect. She knew when to slow down and when to speed up. She knew which notes to play louder and which to play softer. She understood how to make the music breathe, like a living thing. This was not the playing of someone who had only listened to recordings. This was the playing of someone who had been taught well, but the most amazing thing was the emotion in her playing. Each note carried feeling. When she played sad parts, Marcus could feel the sadness in his chest. When she played joyful parts, he wanted to smile. When she played dramatic parts, his heart beat faster. Sarah was not just making sounds on a piano. She was telling stories with music. After 20 minutes of playing, Sarah finally began to slow down. She played softer and softer until the last notes floated in the air like whispers. Then there was silence. Sarah sat very still for a moment, her hands resting on the keys. She seemed surprised by what had just happened. Slowly, she turned to look at Marcus. Marcus was standing with his mouth open, staring at her. There were tears in his eyes. He had heard beautiful music many times in his life, but this was different. This was special in a way he could not explain. That was ... double quotes. Marcus started to speak, then stopped. He could not find the right words. Sarah's face turned red again. She suddenly remembered where she was and who she was with. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I got carried away. I played for too long. You need to practice for your concert." She started to get up from the piano bench, but Marcus held up his hand. "Please do not apologize," he said. "That was the most beautiful piano playing I have heard in years." Sarah looked at him with disbelief. "You do not have to be nice to me, Mr. Chun. I know I am not a real pianist." "But you are wrong," Marcus said firmly. "You are a real pianist. More real than many people who call themselves professional musicians." Sarah shook her head. "I just, play for fun sometimes. I have an old keyboard at home. But it is nothing like this beautiful piano." Marcus walked closer to the stage. "Sarah, where did you learn to play like that? That was not just listening to music on the radio. Someone taught you well." Sarah's expression changed. The joy from playing music faded from her face. She looked down at her hands, which were still resting on the piano keys. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly. "Another life." "Tell me about that other life," Marcus said gently. He could see that this was a painful topic for Sarah, but he had to know more. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the empty hall, as if checking to make sure no one else could hear. Finally, she began to speak. When I was a little girl, I took piano lessons, she said. My teacher said I had talent. I practiced every day after school. I loved it more than anything in the world. She paused, and Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes. I entered competitions when I was a teenager, Sarah continued. I won some prizes. People said I might become a professional pianist someday. I dreamed of playing in big concert halls like you do. What happened? Marcus asked softly. Sarah's voice became very quiet. Life happened. My family lost our money. My mother got sick. I had to quit lessons and start working to help pay bills. I was 17 years old. Marcus felt his heart break a little as he listened. He could imagine a young Sarah, full of dreams and talent, having to give up everything she loved. That was 20 years ago, Sarah said. I sold my piano to help pay for my mother's medicine. I have been working cleaning jobs ever since. I bought a small keyboard a few years ago, but it is not the same. I play sometimes at night when I get home from work, but only quietly so I do not bother the neighbors. Marcus was amazed. Sarah had not touched a real piano for 20 years, but she had just played like a professional. Her talent had survived all those years of silence. It had stayed alive in her heart, waiting for a chance to come out again. Sarah, Marcus said, you have a gift, a real gift. It would be a terrible waste to keep it hidden. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It is too late for me now, Mr. Chun. I am not young anymore. I have responsibilities. I cannot dream about music careers like I did when I was a child. It is never too late for music, Marcus said. Never. Sarah stood up from the piano bench. She smoothed down her uniform and picked up her cleaning supplies. Thank you for letting me play your piano, she said. It was like a dream come true, but now I should go home. You need to get ready for your concert. Marcus watched her walk toward the edge of the stage. He knew this moment was important. If he let Sarah leave now, she might go back to hiding. Her talent forever, he might never see her again. The world might never hear her beautiful music. He made a decision that would change both of their lives. Sarah, wait, he called out. I have something to ask you. Sarah stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back to look at Marcus. Her cleaning bucket hung from one hand, and her cloth was still clutched in the other. She looked tired suddenly, as if playing the piano had used up all her energy. But there was also something else in her face, a sadness that seemed to come from deep inside. What is it, Mr. Chun? She asked quietly. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage and walked toward her. He could see that Sarah was ready to leave, ready to go back to her regular life of cleaning and working. But he could not let that happen. Not after what he had just witnessed. I need to know more about your story, Marcus said. You did not just take a few piano lessons as a child. You were serious about music. Very serious. Sarah set down her cleaning bucket and sat on the edge of the stage, her legs hanging over the side. She looked very small sitting there in her gray uniform. For a moment she did not speak. Then she took a deep breath. You really want to know? She asked. Yes, Marcus said. I really want to know. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were not the soft hands of someone who spent their life playing piano. They were rough and red from years of cleaning with strong chemicals. But Marcus could see that they were still musical hands. Her fingers were long and elegant, perfect for reaching across piano keys. My name is Sarah Martinez, she began. I was born in this city 38 years ago. My mother was a secretary. My father left when I was very young. We did not have much money, but my mother worked hard to give me a good life. She paused and smiled a little, remembering something happy. When I was 6 years old, I heard piano music on the radio. It was a piece by Mozart. I had never heard anything so beautiful. I asked my mother if I could learn to play piano. She said we could not afford lessons or a piano. Marcus listened carefully, imagining a little girl falling in love with music. But I did not give up, Sarah continued. I drew piano keys on pieces of paper. I pretended to play on my desk at school. I hummed melodies all the time. My teacher noticed and talked to my mother. She said I seemed to have a natural feeling for music. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she remembered those early days. My mother worked extra hours and saved money for 6 months. Finally, she bought me an old piano from a church that was closing down. It was not pretty, but it worked. She found a piano teacher who agreed to give me lessons for very little money. Marcus could picture it, a determined mother and a talented little girl working together to make music possible. My teacher's name was Mrs. Rodriguez. She was old and strict, but she was wonderful. She taught me everything: how to sit, how to move my hands, how to read music, how to practice. She said I learned faster than any student she had ever taught. Sarah's eyes were shining now as she remembered her beloved teacher. By the time I was 10, I was playing pieces that most teenagers could not play. Mrs. Rodriguez entered me in my first competition when I was 11. I was so nervous that I almost ran away from the stage. But when I started playing, the nervousness went away. I won first place. Marcus was not surprised. He had heard how talented Sarah was. After that, I won many competitions. Local ones, then regional ones, then state competitions. Music magazines wrote articles about me. They called me a prodigy, a child with exceptional talent. People started to notice me. Sarah stood up and walked back toward the piano. She touched the keys gently as if they were old friends. When I was 15, I was invited to play with the City Symphony Orchestra. It was the biggest moment of my life. My mother bought me a beautiful dress. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me prepare for months. The night of the concert, the hall was full of people who came just to hear me play. Marcus could imagine it, a young Sarah in a beautiful dress, playing, with a full orchestra, her mother and teacher watching proudly from the audience. I played a Mozart piano concerto. When I finished, the audience stood up and clapped for 5 minutes. The newspaper said it was one of the best performances they had ever heard from someone so young. Music schools started calling, offering me scholarships. Sarah's voice began to change. The happiness was fading, replaced by something sadder. Everything was perfect. I was going to study at a famous music school. I was going to become a professional pianist. I was going to travel the world playing music. My dreams were all coming true. She stopped talking and turned away from the piano. What happened? Marcus asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Sarah sat down on the piano bench, but she did not play. She just stared at the keys. Everything fell apart, she said quietly. It happened very fast. My mother's company went out of business. She lost her job. At the same time, she got very sick. The doctor said she needed expensive treatment, but we had no money for health insurance. Marcus felt his heart sink. He could see where this story was going. Mrs. Rodriguez tried to help. She offered to teach me for free, but I could not focus on music when my mother was suffering. I got a job at a grocery store after school to help pay bills. Then I got a second job on weekends. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper now. I had to make a choice. I could follow my dreams and go to music school, but that would mean leaving my mother when she needed me most. Or I could stay and take care of her but give up music forever. Marcus already knew what choice she had made. I chose my mother, Sarah said. I turned down the scholarship. I sold my piano to help pay for her medical bills. I quit taking lessons. I worked 3 jobs to keep us alive. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she continued talking. My mother lived for 2 more years. The whole time I worked and took care of her. I had no time for music. I had no piano to practice on. Slowly I felt my skills slipping away. My fingers forgot how to move. My mind forgot how to read music. Marcus wanted to say something comforting, but he could not find the right words. After my mother died, I was alone. I was 20 years old, and I had no education except high school. I had no skills except music, and I had lost most of that. I got a job cleaning offices at night. Then I got a job cleaning this community center. During the day, Sarah wiped her eyes with her sleeve. For 18 years, I have been cleaning buildings. I bought that little keyboard 5 years ago, but it is not the same as a real piano. I play sometimes, but only simple songs. I thought I had lost everything that made me special. She looked up at Marcus with tears still in her eyes. Until tonight. When I played your piano, I remembered who I used to be. For a few minutes, I felt like that 15-year-old girl again, full of dreams and music. Marcus sat down next to Sarah on the piano bench. He was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything she had told him. This was not just a story about lost dreams. This was a story about sacrifice and love and surviving terrible losses. "Sarah," he said finally, "what you did for your mother was beautiful. You gave up everything to take care of someone you loved. That shows the same kind of heart that makes your music so special." Sarah shook her head. "But look at me now. I am 38 years old. I clean toilets for a living. I have no money, no education, no future. It is too late for me to be a musician." Marcus turned to face her directly. "I do not think it is too late. Tonight you played like someone who never stopped being a musician. Your talent is still there, Sarah. It has been waiting for you all these years." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "What are you saying?" Marcus took a deep breath. He was about to make an offer that would surprise them both. Marcus looked at Sarah sitting beside him on the piano bench. Her story had moved him deeply. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her dreams to save her mother's life. She had given up everything she loved and then lived with that loss for 18 years, but her talent had survived. It was still there, waiting to bloom again. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "I want to make you an offer." Sarah turned to look at him. Her eyes were still red from crying, but there was curiosity in her face. "What kind of offer?" she asked. Marcus had been thinking fast while Sarah told her story. He was successful and wealthy from his music career. He had helped many young musicians over the years, but he had never met anyone like Sarah, someone with such pure talent who had been forced to hide it away. "I want to help you get back to music," Marcus said. "I want to be your teacher." Sarah's eyes grew wide. "I do not understand." "I have a music studio in my house," Marcus explained. "It has 3 grand pianos and practice rooms. I want you to come there and work with me. I will teach you everything you have forgotten. I will help you remember what you used to know and then teach you even more." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Mr. Chun, that is very kind, but I cannot afford piano lessons from someone like you. I barely make enough money to pay for food and rent." Marcus shook his head. "You would not pay me anything." "I would teach you for free." "But why?" Sarah asked. "Why would you do that for someone like me?" Marcus thought about how to explain his feelings. "Sarah, in my career, I have met thousands of people who want to be musicians. Most of them have money for lessons and fancy instruments, but they do not have what you have. They do not have real talent. They do not have music in their soul." He gestured toward the piano. "What you played tonight was not just technique, it was art, it was emotion, it was truth. That cannot be bought or taught. You either have it or you do not, and you have it." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see that she was trying to process what he was saying. "But I have a job," she said finally. "I have to work to pay my bills. I cannot just stop working to take piano lessons." Marcus had thought about this too. What if you could work fewer hours? What if you cleaned my studio in exchange for lessons? That way you would still have some income, but you would also have time to practice. Sarah looked confused. "You would trust me to clean your studio?" "Sarah, I just watched you clean this piano like it was a precious jewel. I think you would take better care of my studio than anyone else ever could." For the first time since she had started crying, Sarah smiled a little. "You really think I could learn to play well again?" "I do not think you could learn to play well again," Marcus said firmly. "I know you could. Sarah, you already play well. With some practice and guidance, you could play professionally." "Professionally?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus nodded. "I have a benefit concert coming up in 3 months. It is a big event with many important people in the music world. What if you performed at that concert? Sarah stood up quickly, shaking her head. Oh no, Mr. Chun, I could never do that. I have not performed for anyone except you in 20 years. I would be too scared. I would make mistakes. I would embarrass you. Marcus stood up too. You would not embarrass me. You would amaze everyone, just like you amazed me tonight. Sarah began to pace back and forth on the stage. Marcus could see that she was torn between hope and fear. This is crazy, she said. People like me do not get second chances like this. This only happens in movies. But it is happening to you, Marcus said, right now, tonight. Sarah stopped, pacing, and looked at him. What if I fail? What if I try to come back to music and I cannot do it? What if I am not as good as you think I am? Marcus walked over to her. Sarah, what if you succeed? What if you are even better than I think you? What if this is your chance to finally live the life you were meant to live? Sarah looked down at her hands again. These hands that had scrubbed floors and cleaned windows for so many years. These hands that used to create beautiful music. Could they really do it again? I am scared, she admitted quietly. Being scared is normal, Marcus said. I was scared before my first professional concert too. Every musician gets scared. But fear should not stop you from trying. Sarah walked back to the piano and sat down. She played a few soft notes, thinking about everything Marcus had said. The offer seemed too good to be true. A famous pianist wanted to teach her for free. He wanted to help her perform again. He believed in her when she barely believed in herself. How would this work? She asked. If I said yes, what would happen? Marcus sat down beside her again. First, you would come to my studio tomorrow evening after your work here is finished. I would show you around and we would talk about what you need to learn. Then we would start with simple exercises to get your fingers strong again. He played a few scales on the piano to demonstrate. We would work on technique first. Your natural talent is still there, but your muscles need to remember how to move correctly. That will take time and practice. Sarah nodded. She understood that she would need to rebuild her skills slowly. After a few weeks of basic work, we would start learning pieces, Marcus continued. First, simple pieces to build your confidence. Then more difficult ones. I would teach you pieces that showcase your strengths. What about the concert? Sarah asked nervously. The concert would be your goal, Marcus said. Something to work toward. But if you do not feel ready in 3 months, we can wait. There will be other concerts. The important thing is that you start playing again. Sarah thought about her life. As it was now, she woke up early every morning and cleaned buildings until late at night. She went home to her small apartment and ate dinner alone. On weekends, she sometimes played her little keyboard, but quietly, so the neighbors would not complain. It was a lonely life with no excitement and no dreams, but what Marcus was offering was a chance to change everything. A chance to bring music back into her life. A chance to be the person she used to be, or maybe even better. What about my job here at the community center? She asked. You could keep working here during the day, Marcus said. We would practice in the evenings and on weekends. Eventually, if your music career takes off, you might not need other jobs. But we would take it slowly. Sarah played a few more notes. On the piano. The sound was so beautiful compared to her little keyboard at home. She imagined being able to play a piano like this every day. She imagined learning new pieces and performing for audiences again, but she also imagined failing. She imagined disappointing Marcus and embarrassing herself. She imagined discovering that her talent was not as good as she remembered. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Marcus nodded. Of course, this is a big decision. Take all the time you need. Sarah stood up and gathered her cleaning supplies again. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Chun, and thank you for listening to my story. No one has ever asked me about my music before. Thank you for sharing it with me, Marcus said. And thank you for playing tonight. It was truly beautiful. Sarah walked toward the edge of the stage, then turned back one more time. Mr. Chun, she said. Yes? What made you decide to help me? You do not even know me, Marcus thought about her question. When I heard you humming while you cleaned, I recognized something special. When I heard you play, I knew I was right. But when I heard your story, I realized that you are not just talented. You are brave and kind and strong. Those are the qualities that make great musicians. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not sad tears, they were tears of hope. I will think about your offer, she said. I promise. That is all I ask, Marcus said. Sarah left the community center that night with her mind spinning. As she walked to her car, she thought about the amazing conversation she had just had. A few hours ago, she was just a cleaning lady humming while she worked. Now she had been offered a chance to return to the music world. When she got home to her small apartment, Sarah sat down at her little keyboard. She played the same pieces she had played on the grand piano, but they sounded thin and weak on the cheap electronic keys. Still, she played for 2 hours, longer than she had played in years. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept thinking about Marcus's offer. She kept hearing his words, "It is never too late for music." By morning, she had made her decision. The next evening, Sarah stood outside Marcus Chun's house, holding a small bag with her cleaning supplies. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold October air, but from nervousness. She had spent the whole day thinking about whether she was making the right decision. But every time she started to doubt herself, she remembered the feeling of playing that beautiful grand piano. Marcus's house was bigger than any place Sarah had ever been inside. It was a modern home with large windows and clean lines. Through one of the windows, she could see a piano. Even from outside, she could tell it was magnificent. She rang the doorbell, and Marcus answered quickly. He was smiling, but Sarah could see that he was nervous too. This was new for both of them. "Sarah," he said warmly, "I am so glad you came." "I am glad I came too," Sarah said, though her voice was shaky. "I hope I made the right choice." Marcus led her through his house to the music studio. Sarah gasped when she saw it. The room was large and bright, with 3 different pianos. There were comfortable chairs, music stands, and shelves full of sheet music. The walls were covered with pictures of Marcus performing with famous orchestras around the world. "This is where you will practice," Marcus said, gesturing around the room. "You can use any of these pianos whenever you want." Sarah walked slowly to the nearest piano, a beautiful black grand piano that gleamed under the soft lights. "It is like a dream," she whispered. "Now it is your dream too," Marcus said. They spent the first hour just talking. Marcus wanted to understand exactly what Sarah remembered and what she had forgotten. He had her play scales and simple exercises. Some came back to her easily. Others were harder. "Your muscle memory is still there," Marcus told her, "but your muscles are out of shape. It is like an athlete who stops training for many years. The knowledge is still in your brain, but your body needs to remember how to do the work over." The next few weeks, Sarah came to Marcus's studio every evening after finishing her work at the community center. At first, she could only practice for an hour before her hands got tired. But slowly her strength and endurance grew. Marcus was a patient teacher. He never got frustrated when Sarah made mistakes. Instead, he helped her understand why the mistakes happened and how to fix them. He taught her new techniques that she had never learned as a teenager. He showed her how to sit differently, how to breathe while playing, how to use her whole body to create music. "Music is not just about your fingers," he explained one evening. "It is about your arms, your back, your breathing, even your feet. Everything must work together." Sarah learned fast, just like she had as a child. But this time was different. As an adult, she understood music in ways that she never could as a teenager. She had lived through sadness and loss and hard work. These experiences made her playing deeper and more emotional. After a month of practice, Marcus gave Sarah her first real piece to learn. It was a Chopin waltz, beautiful but not too difficult. Sarah was excited to work on real music again instead of just exercises, but learning the piece was harder than she expected. Her fingers knew how to move, but her mind had trouble reading the sheet music quickly. She had to practice each section many times before she could play it smoothly. "I am so slow," Sarah complained one evening after struggling with a difficult passage. "You are not slow," Marcus said. "You are careful. That is much better than being fast and sloppy." As the weeks went by, people began to notice changes in Sarah. Her co-workers at the community center saw that she seemed happier. She hummed more while she worked. She smiled more often. She had more energy. "You seem different lately," said Maria, another cleaning lady who worked at the center. "Did something good happen to you?" Sarah wanted to tell Maria about her piano lessons, but she was afraid people would not believe her. A cleaning lady taking lessons from a famous pianist seemed too strange to be true. "I'm just feeling better," Sarah said. "I started a new hobby." At home, Sarah practiced on her little keyboard for hours every night. She knew it was not the same as practicing on a real piano, but it helped her memorize the pieces Marcus was teaching her. Her neighbors sometimes complained about the noise. Even though she played very quietly, after 2 months of lessons, Marcus had an idea. "I think you should start performing for small groups," he said. "Nothing big or scary, just a few people who love music." Sarah's heart started beating fast. "I do not think I am ready for that." "You are more ready than you think," Marcus said. "I have some friends who would love to hear you play. They are musicians and music teachers. They would be kind and supportive." The idea of performing for anyone, even Marcus's friends, terrified Sarah, but she knew that Marcus was right. If she was going to perform at the big benefit concert, she needed to practice playing for audiences. Marcus invited 6 of his musician friends to his house for a small concert. Sarah spent a week preparing 2 pieces, the Chopin Waltz and a simple Beethoven Sonata. She practiced until her fingers could play the notes perfectly, even when she was nervous. The night of the small concert, Sarah wore her best dress, which was not very fancy, but was clean and neat. The 6 musicians sat in Marcus's living room, drinking tea and waiting to hear this mysterious woman that Marcus had been telling them about. When Sarah sat down at the piano, her hands were shaking so much that she could barely find the keys. She looked at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging smile. "Take your time," he said quietly. "Just breathe and play." Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the music she loved. She thought about her mother, who had worked so hard to give her piano lessons. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, her first teacher, who had believed in her talent. She thought about all the years she had spent dreaming of playing piano again. When she opened her eyes and began to play, the shaking stopped. The music flowed from her fingers like water from a spring. She played both pieces without making any major mistakes. When she finished, the small audience clapped enthusiastically. "That was wonderful," said one of the musicians, a violin player named David. "You have a beautiful touch." "Your phrasing is very musical," said another, a piano teacher named Jennifer. "You feel the music deeply." After the musicians left, Marcus and Sarah sat in his studio talking about the performance. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Scared, but also excited," Sarah said honestly. "I had forgotten how good it feels to play for other people." "You did very well," Marcus said. "My friends were impressed. But more importantly, you looked like you enjoyed it." Sarah nodded. "I did enjoy it. For a few minutes I felt like myself again, like the person I was supposed to be." Marcus smiled. "Then you are ready for the next step. What is the next step?" Sarah asked. Marcus's expression became more serious. "The benefit concert is next month. It is time to start preparing your program for that performance." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had been so focused on learning to play again that she had almost forgotten about the big concert. The thought of performing in front of hundreds of people still seemed impossible, but she had come this far. She had rebuilt her technique and her confidence. She had performed for Marcus's friends and done well. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready for something bigger. "What pieces do you want me to play?" she asked. Marcus had been thinking about this for weeks. "I want you to play pieces that show your strengths, pieces that tell your story, music that comes from your heart." Over the next few days, Marcus and Sarah chose 3 pieces for the concert program. Each piece was special and meaningful. Each piece would show a different side of Sarah's musical personality. The real work was about to begin. The night of the benefit concert arrived faster than Sarah had expected. She stood backstage at the city's most prestigious concert hall, wearing a beautiful black evening gown that Marcus had insisted on buying for her. Her hands were cold and shaking, and her heart was beating so fast she thought everyone around her must be able to hear it dot through a crack in the curtain. Sarah could see the audience filling the grand concert hall. There were over 2,000 seats, and they were nearly all full. She saw men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses. She recognized some faces from newspaper photos, important business people, politicians, and celebrities who had come to support the charity. "I cannot do this," Sarah whispered to Marcus, who was standing beside her. "There are too many people. What if I forget the music? What if I make mistakes?" Marcus put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have prepared well, Sarah. You know these pieces perfectly. Trust yourself." In the 3 weeks since they had chosen her program, Sarah had practiced harder than she had ever practiced in her life. She worked at the community center during the day, then spent 4 to 6 hours every evening at Marcus's studio. On weekends, she practiced for 8 hours each day. Her fingers had developed calluses and her back ached from sitting at the piano, but the music had become part of her again. The 3 pieces she would perform tonight told the story of her life. First, she would play a gentle Chopin nocturne that reminded her of her childhood dreams. Then, a powerful Beethoven sonata that represented the struggles and hardships she had faced. Finally, she would end with her own arrangement of a simple folk melody, the same tune her mother used to hum while cooking dinner. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement over the loudspeaker, "please welcome our first performer of the evening, Sarah Martinez." Sarah's legs felt weak as she walked onto the stage. The lights were so bright that she could barely see the audience, but she could feel their eyes on her. She heard polite applause as she made her way to the beautiful grand piano at the center of the stage. Sarah sat down on the piano bench and adjusted her dress. She looked out at the sea of faces in the audience. For a moment, she felt completely alone and terrified. These people had paid a lot of money to hear professional musicians. What was she doing here? Then she remembered something Marcus had told her during their first lesson. Music is not about being perfect. It is about sharing your heart with other people. Sarah closed her eyes and took 3 deep breaths. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed so much to give her piano lessons. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had seen her potential when she was just a little girl. She thought about all the years she had spent cleaning floors while dreaming of sitting at a piano like this one. When she opened her eyes, Sarah felt calmer. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes of the Chopin nocturne floated through the concert hall like drops of silver. Sarah's touch was gentle and expressive, each note carefully shaped with feeling. The melody sang sweetly in the upper register while her left hand provided a flowing accompaniment below. As Sarah played, something magical happened. The nervousness began to fade away. The bright lights seemed softer. The audience disappeared from her consciousness. There was only the music and the beautiful piano and her hands creating sounds that came from deep inside her soul. The Chopin piece lasted about 5 minutes. When the last note faded into silence, there was a moment of complete quiet in the hall. Then the audience began to applaud. It was not the polite, automatic applause that Sarah had heard when she first walked on stage. This was real appreciation from people who recognized that they had just heard something special. Sarah felt a surge of confidence as she prepared for the second piece. The Beethoven sonata was much more difficult and dramatic than the Chopin. It had loud, powerful sections and soft, mysterious sections. It required technical skill and emotional depth. When Sarah began the Beethoven, her whole body became involved in making the music. Her hands flew across the keys in the fast passages. Her arms and shoulders moved with the rhythm. She leaned into the piano during the loud parts and pulled back during the quiet parts. This was not just piano playing, this was storytelling through music. The audience was completely captivated. In the expensive seats near the front, Sarah could see people leaning forward, their faces showing intense concentration. In the balcony, she could see others with their eyes closed, lost in the music. No one was checking their phones or whispering to their neighbors. Everyone was listening. The Beethoven sonata lasted 15 minutes. When Sarah played the final dramatic chords, the sound echoed through the hall for several seconds before fading to silence. Then the audience erupted in applause that was much louder and longer than before. Some people even stood up, but Sarah was not finished. She still had one more piece to play, the most personal piece of all. Sarah adjusted her position on the bench and looked out at the audience. For the first time since beginning her performance, she spoke. "The last piece I will play tonight is special to me," she said into the microphone that had been placed near the piano. "It is based on a simple melody that my mother used to hum. She worked very hard to give me the chance to study music. This piece is for her and for everyone who has supported someone else's dreams." Sarah began to play the folk melody her mother had hummed. It started simply, just the basic tune played with one hand. But gradually Sarah began to add harmonies and variations. She wove the simple melody through different keys and rhythms. She created a conversation between her left hand and right hand, as if two people were singing together. The music grew more complex and beautiful as Sarah played. She took the simple folk tune and transformed it into something that was part classical, part jazz, part her own original creation. It was music that came entirely from her heart, music that no one had taught her, music that could only exist because of her unique life experience. As the piece developed, Sarah thought about her journey. She thought about the scared little girl who had first touched piano keys. She thought about the teenager who had won competitions and dreamed of a music career. She thought about the young woman who had given up everything to care for her dying mother. She thought about the years of cleaning buildings and wondering if she would ever make music again, and she thought about Marcus, who had heard something special in her humming and given her a second chance. She thought about the long hours of practice and the gradual return of her skills. She thought about the small concert for Marcus's friends and how good it had felt to perform again. All of these memories and emotions flowed through her hands into the music. The simple folk melody became a story of loss and hope, of dreams delayed but not destroyed, of the power of music to heal and transform lives. When Sarah played the final notes, she held them with the sustained pedal, letting the sound ring in the hall until it naturally faded to complete silence. For several seconds, no one moved. The audience sat in stunned quiet, processing what they had just experienced. Then one person in the front row stood up and began to clap. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an enthusiasm that Sarah had never imagined possible. People were not just clapping, they were cheering and calling out, "Bravo!" Some had tears in their eyes. Sarah sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Finally, she stood up and bowed to the audience. Her own eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. As she walked off the stage, Sarah felt like she was floating. She had done it. She had performed for 2,000 people and they had loved it. After 20 years away from music, she was truly a pianist again, but the evening was far from over. What happened next would change Sarah's life in ways she never could have imagined. Sarah barely made it backstage before people began approaching her. The first was a woman in an expensive red dress who introduced herself as Catherine Williams, a music critic for the city's largest newspaper. "Miss Martinez," Catherine said, "that was one of the most moving performances I have heard in 20 years of covering classical music. Where have you been hiding? Why have we never heard of you before?" Before Sarah could answer, a tall man in a black suit stepped forward. "I am Robert Chun from Steinway Records," he said, handing Sarah a business card. "We need to talk about recording opportunities." More people crowded around. Sarah felt dizzy from all the attention. A few hours ago, she had been a nervous cleaning lady afraid of making mistakes. Now she was surrounded by music industry professionals who wanted to work with her. Marcus appeared beside her and gently guided her to a quiet corner backstage. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Confused," Sarah said honestly. "Happy, but confused. Is this really happening?" "It is really happening," Marcus said with a big smile. "You were magnificent tonight, Sarah. Everyone could see that you are a true artist." Over the next hour, Sarah met with several people who wanted to offer her opportunities. Besides the recording company executive, there was a booking agent who managed concert tours, a music teacher from the conservatory who wanted to offer her advanced lessons, and a reporter from a national music magazine who wanted to write a story about her. The most surprising visitor was Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the president of the Metropolitan Music Conservatory. This was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. "Miss Martinez," Dr. Morrison said, "I would like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your musical education at our conservatory. We have a special program for adult students who show exceptional talent." Sarah stared at her in amazement. "A full scholarship, but I am 38 years old. I clean buildings for a living." "Age does not matter when someone has your gift," Dr. Morrison said. "We believe you could benefit from formal training to reach your full potential as a performer." When the crowd finally thinned out, Sarah and Marcus sat alone in the empty backstage area. Sarah still could not believe everything that had happened. "Marcus," she said, "3 months ago I was just a janitor humming while I worked. Tonight, people are offering me recording contracts and scholarships. How is this possible?" Marcus smiled. "It is possible because you never really stopped being a musician. Sarah, you just stopped having opportunities to show your talent. Tonight you showed the world who you really are." In the weeks after the concert, Sarah's life changed completely. The newspaper review called her performance a revelation and the discovery of the year. The story about her journey from janitor to pianist spread across the internet. Television shows wanted to interview her. Radio stations played recordings of her performance. Sarah decided to accept the scholarship to the conservatory. She quit her job at the community center, though she was sad to leave her coworkers. Maria, the other cleaning lady, hugged her tightly when she heard the news. "I always knew you were special," Maria said. "I could tell by the way you hummed while you worked." At the conservatory, Sarah studied with the best teachers in the country. She learned advanced techniques and studied music theory. But her teachers quickly realized that Sarah's greatest strength was not what she could learn in school. It was the life experience and emotional depth that she brought to her music. "You play with a maturity that most of our students will never achieve," her main teacher told her. "Your music tells stories that come from real life." 6 months after the benefit concert, Sarah signed a recording contract. Her first album was called Second Chances, and it featured the 3 pieces she had played that night. Along with other works that had special meaning to her, the album was not just a success with classical music fans. It appealed to people who normally did not listen to classical music because Sarah's story inspired them. Here was proof that it was never too late to follow your dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. Second Chances reached #1 on the classical music charts and stayed there for 6 months. It also appeared on the regular album charts, something that rarely happened with classical recordings. Sarah appeared on television shows and gave interviews to magazines around the world, but success did not change who Sarah was inside. She remembered where she came from and wanted to help others who faced the same challenges she had faced. With the money from her album sales and concert performances, Sarah started the Dreams Deferred Foundation. This organization provided music lessons and instruments to children from poor families. It also helped adults who had given up music careers for financial reasons to get back into music. "I know what it feels like to have your dreams taken away," Sarah said at the foundation's first fundraising event. "I want to make sure other people get the chances I almost missed." The foundation's first scholarship recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Amanda, whose family could not afford to send her to music school. With the foundation's help, Amanda was able to study violin and eventually join a professional orchestra. Sarah Martinez saved my future, Amanda said. She showed me that someone who understands struggle can also understand dreams. Marcus remained Sarah's closest friend and advisor throughout her transformation. He was proud of what she had achieved, but he was even more proud of who she had become. You could have just focused on your own career, he told her one day as they sat in his studio. But you chose to help other people too. That shows the same character that made your music so special that first night. 2 years after the benefit concert, Sarah was invited to perform with the world's most famous orchestras. She played in concert halls in New York, London, Paris, and Tokyo. Music critics compared her to the greatest pianists in history, but Sarah's favorite performances were still the small concerts she gave for the Dreams Deferred Foundation. At these events, she played for audiences that included many people who had never heard live classical music before. She told her story and encouraged others to pursue their own dreams, no matter how old they were or how many obstacles they faced. At one of these concerts, a middle-aged man approached her afterward. I used to play guitar when I was young, he said. I gave it up to focus on my job and family. But hearing your story makes me think maybe it is not too late to try again. It is never too late, Sarah told him, remembering the words Marcus had said to her that first night. Music waits for you, no matter how long you are away. On the 3rd anniversary of her comeback performance, Sarah returned to the community center where it all began. The center had been renovated and now had a proper music room with several pianos. Sarah had donated the money for the renovation. She found Maria, her old co-worker, who now managed the center's music programs. Do you ever miss cleaning? Maria asked with a smile. Sarah laughed. I miss the quiet time to think, she said. But I do not miss wondering if I would ever play piano again. That evening, Sarah gave a free concert at the community center for everyone in the neighborhood. Many people who attended had never been to a classical music concert before, but they came because they knew Sarah's story. They knew she was one of them, someone who had worked hard and struggled and never given up hope. As Sarah played that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about her mother, who would have been so proud to see her daughter's dreams finally come true. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, her first teacher, who had planted the seeds of music in her heart. She thought about the years of cleaning floors, and wondering if she would ever be more than just someone who hummed while she worked. She thought about Marcus, who had the courage to see something special in a simple woman with a cloth and a bottle of furniture polish. Most of all, she thought about the power of music to transform lives. Not just her own life, but the lives of everyone who heard her play. Music had the power to remind people that dreams were worth fighting for, no matter how long they took to come true. When Sarah finished her performance that night, the audience stood and applauded for a long time. But the applause was different from what she heard in fancy concert halls. This applause came from people who understood struggle and hope. This applause came from people who saw their own dreams reflected in her story. Sarah Martinez had started as a janitor who hummed classical music while she cleaned. She had become one of the most celebrated pianists in the world. But more importantly, she had become proof that it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. The simple woman who asked to play piano for fun had jolted everyone, including herself. And in doing so, she had reminded the world that extraordinary things can come from the most ordinary places, if only someone is brave enough to listen for the music that lives inside every human heart.